Hello there. I am Gray Gibson Haymond, and I have one of Pauline's many grandchildren. And this is a poem by her, 11 of Us on Grandpa's Grave. Mother and her 2 sisters wanted to see the new headstone, so we all went out in 2 station wagons. Aunt Sybil said the cemetery was sad, and Aunt Alice asked why we kids couldn't be quiet and stop walking on the dead people. Mother said, "Look, isn't that symbolic? All of them on Dad's grave." And she brought the baby to sit at our feet as we grandkids stood close together above Grandpa. I had a good feeling standing there. Grandpa was just as much part of us right then as my cousin Stevie flicking back his red hair next to me. I could quit being angry and sad about how weak and old Grandpa got. Instead, it was like the ending of a good book, and he was free from worrying anymore about what would happen. It had all happened, and I knew how his story ended. Grandpa's life, with all its interesting tales, was even fuller to me because it was rounded out, complete, and 11 of us, shoulder to shoulder, came from him.
Good morning. We are here to celebrate and to remember the life of Pauline Durrett Robertson. A life fully lived, and more importantly, by your presence, it is clear, fully shared. Pauline Durrett Robertson was born April 17, 1922, the middle daughter of Mary Eddie Jones Durrett and Walter Lucius Durrett. She was a native Amarillo resident, local historian, and prolific writer. Pauline passed away Sunday morning, January 7th, in Dripping Springs, Texas. She was 95 years old. Pauline authored or co-authored 10 books. 2 of these, Panhandle Pilgrimage and Cowman's Country, were co-written with her husband, R.L., and became bestsellers. She owned Paramount Publishing Company, taught poetry classes and continuing education at Amarillo College for 35 years, and won more than 250 awards for her poetry. Pauline was featured in Ken Burns' documentary, The Dust Bowl, which aired on PBS on November 28, 2012. In the film, Pauline spoke of her childhood, of being poor, and in need during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. Never one to stand by and let injustices take place, Pauline took action in the early 1960s when she discovered that African American children were not allowed in orphanages in Texas and in Amarillo. Those children lived in poverty, severe poverty, and needed food. In 1963, Pauline, Estelle Marsh, and Helen Vahu joined together to found Christian Children's Cottage, a residential child care facility in North Amarillo. A few years later, Pauline and Judge Mary Lou Robinson co-founded Opportunity House, a home for troubled teenagers of all races. She founded and directed Camp Friendship in 1970, a summer camp providing disadvantaged children an opportunity for nurturing, structured experience in the outdoors. In 1957, Pauline's family was chosen Amarillo's Family of the Year by the Amarillo Globe-News. In 1960, NBC TV selected the family for its first 1-hour reality show. So you all are children of reality stars. Oh my gosh. / documentary. Story of a family, filmed at their Amarillo home and broadcast in the United States, Canada, and several other countries. Recently, a documentary produced by Ethan Thompson examined the cultural idea of American family of that era. TV Family used story of a family broadcast footage and contemporary interviews. In the 1990s, Pauline was the first recipient of the awarded Mayor's Friend of the Young Child and was named Amarillo's Woman of the Year by Beta Sigma Phi. She was inducted into the Amarillo High's School Sandy Hall of Fame in 1998. She graduated from St. Edward's University, New College in Austin at age 75 with a BA in English writing. She was married to R.L. Robertson for 66 years until his death in 2006. They had 10 children. R.L. owned and operated Robertson's Market on West 10th Street in Amarillo for 31 years. After their son Kent was born with cerebral palsy in 1944, the couple helped found the Cerebral Palsy Treatment Center, now Children's Rehab Center. The Robertsons were constant presence at First Christian Church in Amarillo. They served as elders and were honored with Elder Emeritus status. Pauline served as a national board member for Church Women United, an ecumenical Christian women's movement. During her final years, Pauline received care from several generous and giving people. The family would like to thank the staff, especially Jennifer at Hill Country Care in Dripping Springs, for recognizing Pauline's worth and treating her with honor and respect. Pauline and R.L. had 10 children. Pauline was preceded in death by her husband R.L., her children Kay, Kent, and Neil, a son-in-law, Mark Robertson Baker, her sisters Lucille and Virginia, and her nephew Roger. She is survived by her children, Robyn Turner, Roy Robertson, P.J. Pierce, and her husband Jack, Laurel Robertson, Jenny Robertson Baker, Ellen Robertson Green, and her husband David, Carrie Robertson Meyer and her husband Pete, a daughter-in-law, Cindy Kohler, her trusted certified nurse assistant, Jennifer Garcia. I won't read all 30 of the grandchildren's names. You know who you are. Of the 15 great-grandchildren and nieces and nephews, 7 of those. Let me give my references, remembrances. I'm so excited about all these different readers. One of the things you have to know about Pauline was she was a theologian and a Bible scholar. Now, this service doesn't have overt scriptures in it. There wasn't an opening sentences other than the songs of the slideshow and the verses sung by Mike. See, she was like Quakers, or not Quakers, Shakers. She saw God in everything. Work was prayer. Service was prayer. And on and on and on. The listing of all of her accomplishments were unknown to me when I served here as an associate many years ago. I just knew her as Pauline and R.L., the couple that were so outgoing and welcoming and assuring to me as a pastor. I was told by a dean Dean Jack Suggs, a bright divinity school, and a Greek class I took with him. That you will go into a pastorate somewhere with your theological degree and all your training and understanding and all the books that you've read and you've contemplated and you've discussed with other seminarians. And there'll be one little old lady in tennis shoes who will rock you and challenge you and question you and know exactly what she's talking about. And that was Pauline. She lived her faith fully. One of her poems that I grew to like and was liked by many actually is a scriptural story. You'll recognize it. It's called Citizen. It has a twist. A first aid kit certainly came in handy, and I was glad to give the fellow a ride to town and arrange for his care. But what I mean to do next is to prevail and prevail on City Hall until that road to Jericho is made safe from bandits. Her faith was not just based in Scripture, it was based in life and meaning. And she gave me the encouragement as a young pastor still, even though I had served other churches, to go out and speak my voice. And that's why I became a member of the board of Planned Parenthood here in Amarillo. Actually, an agency that was established by members of this very congregation. Its first grant was written by one of its members, one of its associates at that time of its founding was the first member of its board, and so on. She allowed me to speak my voice, and from then on I was able to do so more fully in all the pastorates I served later. I can't say that it served me well professionally, but at least I knew I was honest. Another thing she taught me was about ecumenism. She was a part, and very active part, of the Church Women United. And it's correctly stated here in her obituary, a movement. When I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, serving as an interim, I heard that there was a Church Women's United meeting, and I found out that one of my members was going. I said, I'd like to go. I've always been a part of that in every pastorate I've served since coming to First Christian Amarillo and meeting Pauline. I sat in a large meeting room of a church. Many women were gathered there. They were talking about special projects they were working on together. It was one of the most diverse Christian groups I was ever a part of. And I looked at their bulletin and their education materials that we were going to go through, and there was Pauline Durrett Robertson's name. She had written the national curriculum. There are many more things I can say. I can say this: she never bragged about anything that she did. She was truly humble. And it was only years later that I realized she had done and had been such a powerful, meaningful force in the community she served. And now Dr. Bridwell will speak on his remembrances. He knew her much better than I did in ministry, and I am pleased that he is with us today.
I'm going to tell you a secret. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to. You encouraged me about speaking honestly. We're here today because it was the right time for Pauline. A few years ago, we were just sure that Pauline was about to go home to the Lord. So sure that we made preparations for her funeral, even to the day. Pauline didn't agree. She didn't agree. And I think the reason I'm telling you that is because I think it is so descriptive to my mind of Pauline. She did it her way. She did her own thinking. And we're here today because it was okay for us to be here today rather than a few years ago. When I moved to Amarillo some 48 years ago, it wasn't very long until somebody said to me, "You need to meet the Robertson family." Why do I need to meet the Robertson family? Oh, they're famous. How are they famous? Well, they were on national television, selected as an outstanding family in America. You really need to get to know them. Well, I did get to know them, but I began with Mrs. Robertson, the mother of R.L. Sweet lady. I knew where to look for her on Sunday morning, every Sunday morning, right over there in the North Transept. And she was a great soul. That's how I first began meeting the Robertson family, one by one. Great family indeed. There's something I'll tell you if you may not know. Pauline Durrett's acceptance of R.L. Robertson's proposal of marriage was hugely successful and significant. I cannot vouch for the accuracy of my account, but this is the way I remember that Pauline told the story to me. She and R.L. had been dating a short while, mostly dancing at the Nat. You remember the Nat dance hall over an old swimming pool. They were dancing one night, and as they danced, R.L. asked Pauline, "Pauline, would you like to spend the rest of your life with me?" To which she responded, "Yes, I guess I could do that." Thus began the famous family. When Pauline married R.L., she also, in effect, really married First Christian Church because, I would never have known the Robertsons family, in all probability, had they not been ardent, faithful members of the First Christian Church, and I had the privilege of being their pastor for many, many years. What did I learn about Pauline? What you all know. I learned that she was not in any sense a run-of-the-mill individual. She did not fit anyone's mold. She was who she was. She had a marvelous intellect. She preferred to do her own thinking. Her philosophy was, take whatever gifts you have received from God and make the most of them. She did it. Her formal education was delayed because she was busy rearing a family, yet she was highly educated and received her academic degree from St. Edward's when she was a grandmother. She loved books. She was a writer, a publisher of distinction, a poet, taught the subject at Amarillo College. She was a historian. She was very knowledgeable as a theologian. When Dr. Dale Roller's famous youth choir here in Amarillo, First Christian Church, decided to write an original Christian musical composition for presentation at a world convention of the Christian churches in Hawaii, Pauline was enlisted as a theological consultant. They let me in on it too. Pauline had a great talent for asking questions, which eventually led to the enlistment of other people in her many projects, whether in the church or the community. Her interests and concerns were as broad as the world and as personal as an underprivileged child in Amarillo. She had a conscience which did more than wring hands. She was a person of action. She was never intimidated by hardship or negative opinions. In later years, one of my favorite greetings was, "Well, good morning, Pauline. What trouble are you stirring up today?" This always produced a warm, impish grin. Years later, after she had lost her speaking ability, I took unfair advantage, a confession. I took unfair advantage of Pauline by accusing her one day of voting a straight Republican ticket. But sweetly, she responded with a giggle and a broad grin, and I think a like one, which sounded more like take one to me. Personally, I've lost for a while one of my great friends. Our birthdays were pretty close together. I was a little bit older than Pauline, but we celebrated together in the season of our birthday. Across the years, we developed a pleasant, unspoken understanding akin to two people who share an inside story, whatever that might be.
I've been asked to say a few words about Pauline and poetry, one of many interests we shared. Your pastor has said that, reminded you that Pauline taught poetry at Amarillo College for more than 30 years and received countless, though he counted them, awards for her own poems. She also served as president of the Panhandle Pen Women. Due to time constraints, I can only read one of her poems. I'll end with a brief speculation on the possible meanings of the words left to her after her stroke. The poem I've chosen has an unusual subject. It's a brave subject, a subject that was not mentioned, I don't believe, much in Amarillo at the time, in the 80s. As you might remember from the 80s, the special train carrying nuclear weapons from Pantex to military installations across the country was painted white. When the train went out, often in dead of night, a cloud of witnesses from far and near would gather along the tracks to mark its passing. Hear now the poem. The white train. As white as innocence, it whispers past, slow moving with its weighted load of death. The railside witnesses remain steadfast as the train, whitewashed to lessen heat amassed within, rolls again this year, its 20th. As white as innocence, it whispers past, in sinuous line, traversing land retraced to Amarillo's source. With frosted breath, the railside witnesses remain steadfast, positioned to prevail for peace, to outlast the armed train guards and payload underneath. As white as innocence, it whispers past. And though their presence rankles and they are cast outside the secret code, the shibboleth, the railside witnesses remain steadfast. As white as ashes following a blast, as white as bleaching skeletal bones and teeth, as white as innocence, it whispers past. The railside witnesses remain steadfast. About the words, the phrase, like one, the words left to Pauline after her stroke. Frequently, I've learned the fragments of speech left to a person with aphasia are four-letter expletives, expressions of anger or surprise. Like the person herself, Pauline's words were unique. For my part, I could never be sure I'd cracked the code. Like one seemed to cover so many things, depending on context, depending on inflection. The phrase might mean agreed, or please repeat, or that's enough, or excellent, or rarely, whatever. But more often, let's hope so, and amen. It might have been meant as the start of a poem, or the refrain, or the last line of one, or perhaps Pauline herself was meant. The poet Naomi Shihab Nye summed it up best. Let me end by quoting her. Somehow, the words like one make her seem even more like the seer and visionary she was. What could be better? Like as connective, one as permeating calm, what we aspire to, a feeling like that. Pretty hard to get past all the clutter of breaking news and these modern days to do that. But she did. She held that note, those two words. Can I possibly be more like this one, Pauline?
I'm Karen Schroeder. I was a friend of Pauline's. We met 33 years ago at the Camera Club and shared the love of photography, at which she was very good, as most of you know. And then after her stroke, I was the liaison between Pauline, the family, and the Camera Club, and keeping Camera Club people in the know as to what was happening, and Pauline in the know as to what was happening at Camera Club. But I have a really broad sense of humor, and I always took that with me to visit Pauline. And as a result, we laughed a lot. And one of my favorite things in reference to her like one speech after the stroke, in the early days, she would try to speak a lot, and it would come out like one, like one, like one, like one. And I often told her something to the effect of, you know, Pauline, if someone else told me that, I would not believe it, but from you, absolutely. The other thing that made her laugh aloud, although she was not a loud laugher, was I accused her of having invented a new language to which only she was privy to what it meant, and that made her laugh as well. And finally, we were on the same political page, and I would come in a rage about something that was happening in the news and just go on, and she would laugh over my exuberance in the political field. It was my privilege to have Pauline as a friend.
My name is Candace O'Keefe Mathis, but most of the people here know me as Candy, and the older I get, the more I like to be called that. I've been asked to talk about being a kid in the neighborhood around the Robertson's house. I grew up about 1 block away. That is, if you could climb over the fence fast enough to avoid Miss Kuntz and run through Mom Pearl and Big Daddy's yard and not get caught along the way. I lived to be in the Robertson's house. And I realize now it was because of Pauline. And much to her chagrin, I often got there at daylight, and I didn't want to leave until dinner time. And I only left basically when she said, "I hear your mother calling," which meant go home, with apologies to my own family. I wanted to be a Robertson. So, because under the house where Pauline ruled, of course we called her Mrs. Robertson, something fabulous and magical was always happening. I have so many memories. All of us who grew up in that neighborhood do. Because Pauline's house was a wonderful place to be. I'll tell you some of the things I specifically remember that I wanted to be a part of, and she let me as much as she could. I remember her Christmas chart, and I wanted to be able to have my name on it too. Kids could get, her children could get a little money every time they did a special chore so that they could have Christmas money to spend. I remember her ability to fashion a meal out of vegetables in a can that were brought home and unlabeled, sometimes in cans from our store. I remember distinctly watching her in her little nook right off at the kitchen. It was her office and her space where she was typing and reading and watching kids all at the same time. Of course, I remember how she rounded all of us up, often to take a picture. And I remember very much her blowing off anyone who told her or questioned her about the expense of her photography habit. And she'd always say, "Well, I don't drink and I don't smoke, so I guess we can afford it." She also, this was really a time when everyone talked about the fact that the world was getting too crowded. And she was chided on occasion about how many children she had and kept having. And she said, "Well, as far as I can see, there's still a lot of land left in this world." And I'm not sure if it was Jenny or not, but I remember someone of the girls was gliding on the green glider that always sat in the carport of the house, and she stuck her finger, and the tip was cut off. And we were all just paralyzed as children, and then watched Pauline very calmly go out, pick up the fingertip, wrap it in something with ice, put all the kids in the car, and go and get it sewn back on. She was calm in the most chaotic situations. Now that I think back, it was an amazing thing to be. Pauline taught all of us kids in the neighborhood so many life lessons about motherhood, womanhood, calm, patience, activism, rugged individuality, and so much more. Also, she demonstrated the art of meditating while mangling in the middle of all the chaos. I can remember her doing that distinctly. And by the way, if you don't know what a mangle is, ask someone older, pretty much older than you. There was always a baby in the house, always, which fascinated me and scared me more than a little. One of my enduring images of Pauline is standing with one baby on a hip as she tended the stove, called kids to the table, and supervised the filling of milk glasses, passed plates, in her unending round robin of hungry mouths to feed, kids to help with homework, lives to have an impact on. For me personally, I credit her fully for teaching me two very important life skills. She encouraged us neighborhood kids to work with the Robertson kids to write, publish, and sell a summertime neighborhood newspaper. She was the brains behind the operation. She typed up all our stories, sometimes added illustrations. My mother at the church where she worked, right over here, St. Andrews, took the mimeographed sheets, asked someone what that means if you don't know, would print the newspapers for us, and we'd go from neighborhood to neighborhood in the, what is it called? Wayside, west of a neighborhood. And because of that, though PJ and I argued constantly about it as quote-unquote co-editors, she planted a little seed in me that eventually grew to include my journalism college degree and everything professionally I've done since in the 63 years since I first met Mrs. Robertson. Secondly, she taught me something that to this day I still know how to do. It's the magical ability to create and pop in your mouth snappy little pops from chewing gum. I just thought it was fabulous, and I wanted to learn how to do it. To this day, though I don't chew gum the way I used to as a kid, I chew it with always thinking of Mrs. Robertson with great gratitude. I'm teaching my grandchildren how to do the same. All of us non-Robertsons who grew up in the Wayside Western neighborhood are in part the products of the inimitable, resilient, creative, persistent Pauline Durrett Robertson. She's a permanent part of our growing up DNA. She is the source of so many of our best childhood memories. I'm Candy again and a little girl again when I come to Amarillo, and I want to go play at the Robertsons' house. And all of us who cared so much about her as children and didn't realize until so many years later what an impact she had on us, we're the better off for being just a small part of her amazing life and legacy. Thank you.
Hello, I am Jenny, child number 7. Our mom spent most of her childhood in a small house at 1406 West 19th in Amarillo, which is now just a grassy knoll along the side of I-40. But as a toddler, our mother's first friend was a neighbor, her own age, Jolita Beck, who is here today. The Beck family lived only a few houses away, and the Durrett girls and the Beck girls were really a lot more like sisters than neighbors. Jolita has had the privilege of knowing our mother longer than any human left on this earth. She was a devoted friend right up until the end of our mother's life. 95 years, that is true friendship. At the age of 9, our mother's life changed dramatically. Mom's mother, our grandmother Mary, was hospitalized and never returned home. That left our grandfather, Walter Durrett, in and out of work to raise my mother and her 2 sisters during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl years. During those difficult times, our mother often thought of neighboring Mrs. Beck as her surrogate mother. Mom, with her 2 sisters and close neighbors, attended Wolfland Elementary School, where 54 years later, I taught first grade, and today my oldest daughter is now librarian. Mom told us that she remembers feeling like she was so far behind when she started first grade because some of the other kids in that Wolfland area had gotten to go to private kindergarten. But she later realized that because she had been equipped with hours of being read to and sung to by both her mother and father, she caught on quickly and from then on excelled in school. Later, Mom went on to attend Amarillo High School, where she was editor of the school yearbook and a reporter for the school paper. She graduated from AHS with honors in 1939. One particular story she told of her high school years sticks with me today. Mom said that she had always been interested in writing, but she had never entertained the idea of writing for the school newspaper until she realized that the newspaper staff met during lunchtime. On most days, she didn't have food because she didn't have food from home, and she couldn't afford food at school, so there was nothing to do during her lunch break. She said she was embarrassed that she wasn't eating, and so she thought that maybe being involved in some activity would make her less obvious. She joined the journalism department really as a place to blend in during that uncomfortable lunch hour. But soon realized she had found a new home, where 58 years later, she was inducted into the Sandy Hall of Fame for a lifetime of literary and civic contributions. After graduating from high school in 1940, she married our dad, R.L., in Amarillo's First Christian Church when it was downtown, and this church proved to be a constant in their lives. Our parents' devotion to the Disciples of Christ Church led them every summer to attend family camp at Cedar Glen, along with all of us kids. So one year before family camp, Mom designed identical plaid shirts for all of us to wear, and our grandmother helped her sew them. On the first day of camp, when we all showed up wearing them, one woman commented, "Oh, how adorable! Is that so you won't lose someone?" And Dad quickly said, "Heck no, so we won't pick up an extra." Generally pregnant every year and a half for 20-something years, you would think our mom wouldn't have time to do much else. But our household was always bustling. Mom held a Christmas party every year for all of their friends. She had block parties, church parties, Halloween parties for us, countless birthday parties, sock hops, slumber parties, come-as-you-are parties. Our house was an open door to friends, relatives, and neighbors. Mom welcomed kids from Boys Ranch who had no family to visit during weekends and holidays. She took in an occasional other kid or two who had been neglected or abused and needed a temporary safe haven. And we had a foreign exchange student. That foreign exchange student we had from Germany wrote a letter when she heard of Mom's death, and I'm going to read part of it. "I have to thank Mom so much for a wonderful year in 1963 with her family.
The stay in Amarillo influenced my whole life, even my choice of profession to be a social worker. I established and led a daycare center for patients who are old, sick, or handicapped in Hanover. In 1963, she showed me the children's cottage for the neglected African American children that she had started. She went with me to the church where the colored people had their church service, so I could have that experience. Mom was a free-thinking woman of a remarkable independence and self-determination. She had a lot of humor and loved to laugh. She was interested in foreign countries and people, and she wanted to know about their customs and traditions. She kept in touch with me and my family. The highlight was her visit to Hanover, Germany, my hometown. Besides her own 10 kids, Mom also got me, an exchangee from Germany, as the 11th child. I was quickly added to the family with the dutiness and happiness of a family member. I would like to thank Mom, recognizing her worth and honor and respect. God bless you all. Love, Barbie and Dieter, with Catherine and Hannah. With all of these people in and out of our house, Mom did her best to keep things running as smoothly as possible. Every day on a chalkboard in our den, she would list our names and the chores we were responsible for doing before bedtime. But starting in the fall, Mom would amp it up a little. She would get a large piece of butcher paper and create a chart with a long list of chores and the price she would pay us for doing each one. This was our Christmas chore chart that Candace talked about. We could opt to do any chores we wanted, and as many as we wanted, and when we finished a chore, we could write our name in the corresponding box for that day. At the end of each week, she would tally up our pay and dole it out. By December, we each had ample money to buy presents for all of our siblings, and less chores for Mom left her time to tackle the mammoth task of Christmas shopping for 10 kids. And then there were all those days spent nursing sick kids. Mom nursed one child through spinal meningitis and another through encephalitis, while all the time caring for a son with cerebral palsy. We all got the usual mumps, measles, and chickenpox, but luckily, or by plan, several of us had specific illnesses at the same time. We have pictures of like 4 to 6 of us all in Mom's bed, sick with something. Probably the most famous picture, there's like 6 or 7 of us all with the mumps. Summer vacations. I know that most of us kids had visited at least 47 states by the time we were in high school. Trips usually consisted of 7 to 8 of us piled into a station wagon, which was loaded with pillows and suitcases. Dad would stay behind, smart man, working behind at his grocery store, while Mom would show us the world beyond Amarillo. She would meticulously plan these trips, making sure we would experience as much as we could. We would be gone 2 to 3 weeks, spending some nights sleeping in the car and on the ground, with a very few precious nights in motels. We would stop at every historical marker, or after one long trip, our older sister Kay labeled hysterical markers. And that same sister suggested to Mom, just take a picture and read it when we get home. Margaret Wills Elementary was the school we all attended. Our parents sent 9 kids through that school, plus a few grandkids. And I have a daughter who teaches 5th grade there now. My mother was heavily involved in the PTA, Halloween carnivals. She was a Boy Scout leader and a Girl Scout leader. And she even wrote the Margaret Wills school song that they still sing today. In later years, our parents were host volunteers at Margaret Wills and spent years there, up into their 80s, tutoring kids in reading and writing. Our mother was an activist. We always say that our mom was a feminist before it was popular, and that made us proud, but it could sometimes be really embarrassing. For example, sitting next to her in these pews as we sang hymns in which she would loudly change the words. So, God our Father became God our Mother, brothers became sisters, and mankind became humankind. Our mother was an historian. Mom and Dad spent years traveling around the Panhandle, interviewing old ranchers on their front porches. They visited museums, homesteads, and locations that formed the Panhandle's unique history. They photographed and documented everything they learned. And then, Mom locked herself up for years, writing books about their discoveries. In Mom's later years, there were also those times that fellow women poets would gather with Mom at our kitchen table and spend hours working on their poetry and the books that Mom helped them publish, while Dad served them coffee and breakfast rolls. It's amazing to think that any one person could accomplish all these things in one lifetime. My siblings and I know we are fortunate to have had her as our mother.
Finally, I don't know if I can say this, we would like to thank those of you who spent time with Mom after her stroke. Many of you, especially Jennifer Garcia, forged a deep connection with Mom without ever hearing her utter a coherent statement. She loved you for it, and so do we. Or as Mom would say, like one.
Good almost afternoon. I'm Ellen. I am child number 8. And thank you so much for being here. I look out over the congregation with so many friends and family here, and I appreciate it. Hi. Mary Lou Stockdale, look, she's there. We've heard today from so many people with a personal connection to Mom, and yet Mom was known on such a larger scale. John Andrews and John Bridwell have already talked about that 1960 documentary where NBC came to Amarillo and did an hour-long special on our family called Story of a Family. And in 2015, Ethan Thomas, who is a television historian and a documentary filmmaker, rediscovered that NBC program and created his own film called TV Family, using the story of a family as the foundation to talk about American society of that era. In fact, Ethan is here today. He traveled 650 miles, some of it overnight, to be here, so thank you so much, Ethan. And in 2012, the most acclaimed documentary filmmaker in the United States, Ken Burns, wanted to chronicle the experience of people who lived through the greatest environmental disaster in the history of the United States, the Dust Bowl. If you've seen any of Ken Burns' films, you know that his crew relies on first-person narratives to tell stories that are really epic in scope. And for this film, Burns chose a handful of survivors scattered among 4 states to tell their stories, their experiences of the Dust Bowl. That film has been seen by millions of viewers, and Pauline Durrett Robertson was the only person from Amarillo to be featured in the film. As a family, we thought it would be really interesting today to begin to wrap up the celebration of Mom's life by letting her speak. So here in just 5 minutes is Pauline Durrett Robertson in her own words.
Good evening. I'm Jane Wyatt. You probably know me as the television mother, but tonight I join NBC News in taking a look at a real mother and at the family she raises. Ours is a search into the meaning of family life today. Are we through to Amarillo? Are you there, Mrs. Robertson?
Not only am I here, there are about a dozen technicians and maybe half a ton of equipment here with strange men doing mysterious things all over the house. We're beginning to wonder if we're ever going to get back to normal.
From what I understand, NBC was looking for a family to profile, and they sent letters to their NBC affiliates. We want your help in finding a family around which to build a 1-hour program for broadcast at Thanksgiving. The show will be a documentary, photographing actual people in the real circumstances of their immediate life. The family sought should reflect the norm rather than the extraordinary. We've always thought that if they were going to really make it a typical American family, that you wouldn't have chosen one with 9 children.
Starting at the top. Kay, Kent, Robin, PJ, Roy, Laurel, Jenny, Ellen, Neil, Carrie.
Everyone always said that the Robertsons
weren't a family, they were a tribe, because there were so many of us.
Down in Amarillo, the Dust Bowl's biggest city, Walter Lucius Durrett had lost his insurance business and then his health. The strain of it all proved too much for his wife.
And my mother began to despair that things were never going to get better. In fact, they were getting worse. It affected her. It affected her outlook on life, and she began to. Well, she had a nervous breakdown, actually. So the three girls, were pretty motherless during the Depression. Oh, there were many jokes about the dust, of course, so that we laughed so we wouldn't cry, I guess. One of them was a rancher, after a big dust storm, walked out to see about his land, and he was trying to find the barbed wire fence that had been covered with dirt. He saw the tops of it, and there was the cowboy's hat over there. So he walked over and picked up the cowboy's hat, and underneath was a cowboy. And he said, "Oh my goodness, aren't you in trouble there? It's covered with dust." And he said, "Well, I think I'm gonna be okay, but this horse I'm riding is in a little trouble." As I look back on my life, I see things that I wanted to do that are still undone. Because I chose another route, I wasn't able to accomplish those things. The road not taken, you know. For example, instead of raising 10 children and squeezing my writing in when I could have been a full-time writer my whole life. And although that career would have been fulfilling, I would have lost a great joy by not having my family. Presently, I'm writing a book called Choose, Lose. The premise is that when you choose one thing, you lose another. It is just part of the package, a given. When you choose to pass up an opportunity, you need to truly lose it. Bid that thing goodbye and put it out of your life, or you will be miserable, harking back to what might have been. It helps to realize that you can't accomplish everything you would like to do in this life. If you miss becoming a singer or a scientist or a minister, enjoy and celebrate those who have done it, whilst appreciating what you've been able to accomplish. I'm happy with the choices I've made.